Let's speak to the chairperson of the party. Gwede Mantashe is with us here, live from the media center of this conference. Great to see you, sir. Thanks very much for popping by to speak to the SABC. It's been quite the day already because there are so many, I think, emerging issues that have already come about. Some of them contained in the document, some of them not so much. Let me start with what dominated the questions that were asked to the spokesperson of the ANC in the last hour about the finances of the organization and where we stand insofar as that is concerned. This is seen and is a long-standing issue for the organization. There have been admissions that perhaps it hasn't received the kind of attention that it ought to as the ANC pivots from being reliant on its donors to trying to generate its own funding. To people who are watching and are skeptical that this is receiving the kind of attention it needs, what does the chairperson of the party have to say?
Can I tell you what you should take into account very seriously is the fact that beneficiaries of change don't fund the change. And if that is the case, the ANC will reflect that in practical terms, that many of the people who are in the middle strata are beneficiaries of change, but many of them don't recognize that. And as a result of that, they don't associate with change. And any revolution is as successful as the intellectual capacity it generates for itself. But if our own middle class think that they are lucky, they're intelligent, and they can do things, they don't appreciate that they are beneficiaries of change, then the ANC will be in bad shape.
So we're in this position because the middle class is not playing their part?
We're in this case because beneficiaries of change don't see themselves taking responsibility for continued change. They have arrived, they've kicked the ladder, but there are many who must still climb the ladder. And let them be part of white people in business fund the DA unashamedly. Our people in business are ashamed to fund the ANC because they think that it is bad to associate with the ANC. They would rather be neutral. And there's nothing neutral in the case of a battle. And you will notice, Uguti, white supremacy is beginning to emerge and be emboldened. And that white supremacy is based on the theory that black is inferior and wrong, white is superior and correct. Even when there are issues of corruption, if they are white, there are mistakes. If they are black, there are corruption.
You say people are ashamed of associating with the ANC.
Yes.
It's quite the statement, Chair.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you to unpack for us why you think that is, especially because, let's face it, that wasn't always the case.
Yes.
There was a moment, I think, where people would very proudly be associated with the party.
It's because, you see, when we talk of motive forces, we talk of the various people who are beneficiaries of change, whether they're the working class or the peasant or the middle strata or aspirant and real capitalist. That is the definition of motive forces. We always talk to these motive forces. All of a sudden, if you are an ANC person, like myself, if somebody accuses me of anything, of any wrongdoing, I'm found guilty before it is tested. My duty is to prove my innocence. But for everybody else, they are innocent until found guilty. But in my case, I'm guilty until I prove my innocence. That is not a mistake, it's not an accident of history. It's a narrative that is driven out in the media, in the main. That ANC is corrupt, even if you have no proof of corruption. If you're an ANC person, you are corrupt. And I think this NGC is a testament that people are beginning to get together and repolish the ANC image, because it must be polished and be corrected.
It's interesting you say that because part of what the president of the party said in his political overview yesterday, which in some ways was echoed by the Secretary General in his midterm review, is that there are careerists. There are people within the organization who I suppose would have interests that aren't necessarily in the best interest of the party. And in fact, the president yesterday called on delegates here to rid themselves of corrupt people. Now, if it was just a media narrative, the president would have no basis.
It's a media narrative. And we have a responsibility to demystify it. That is our responsibility. That if I'm corrupt as Gwede, the media must say Gwede Mantashe is corrupt. You know, I have a call by Action SA, EFF, MKP, all of them say I'm corrupt, but they have not read the Zondo Commission. The Zondo Commission has found no prima facie evidence of corruption on my past. Hence, their recommendation is for another institution to investigate my activity. I'm waiting for that investigation. But these parties in the opposition go public, in public platform and say, Gwede is corrupt. He has been cited by the Zondo Commission. They have not read the report, but they use it as a point of reference. They must read the report.
Did the Zondo Commission not say that you might have received benefits through security upgrades from Bosasa?
No, I didn't get any money from Bosasa. I get money from Lushaba. That's what I proved to the Zondo Commission. That's why they can't find any corruption with me. I didn't promote any tender for them anywhere in the state. I was not working for the state. I was in the NGO called the ANC. Now, I have accepted that because I'm an ANC person, therefore I'm guilty as charged until I prove my innocence. I've accepted that.
Okay. Let's speak about what is likely to be discussed today in the commissions,
yes.
Right? The National Democratic Revolution and the balance of forces. I want to stick with the first issue as a start, because part of what I think the question has been is whether or not there's an appreciation of where this actually comes from, right? And the point that was made earlier is that yesterday, when the SACP tried to address delegates, there was a bit of, rowdiness, and you had to call the room back into order, even though this concept of the NDR is so closely tied to the SACP's own identity. In fact, it's seen as the contribution that they made to the alliance.
The NDR is actually driven by the ANC and led by the ANC. The party sees the NDR as the shortest route to socialism. That's what the party is standing for socialism. So the ANC must quantify if it is making its contribution in the National Democratic Revolution. And I'm submitting that it does. Let me give you an example. I was listening to Professor Sachs talking at UNISA. He says the biggest disservice received by colonized people was deprivation to access to knowledge. Okay. And I agree with that knowledge creates a better society that determines its own future. Now, if we are going to school in big numbers, as we do now, we are going to change society. But what we should change again is the attitude that the ANC must fund your studies, it must look for a job for you, it must put you in a job, and it must look after you. That is creating a passive society. The ANC must give a young person a fishing rod, and a young person might use the fishing rod to fish, and not expect the ANC to fish for them. Because once they fish for them, they will want the ANC to cook the fish for them. It can't be. The ANC must give young people as many as possible the fishing rods.
And what does that look like? Because to some people it might suggest that perhaps it's the ANC breaking down the barriers to a university degree, which we know are usually financial barriers, as a start. I mean, yesterday, again, the president spoke about overhauling the SETAs, right? The SETAs are meant to do that, meant to create the skills bridge. And we know that they're not necessarily working as they should.
You don't know the SETAs. And I've discovered many in the political circles don't understand what SETAs are. That is the money paid by employers for skilling South Africans. And I'm in mining. We're the only sector that has formalized the recognition of prior learning and structured it. And out of people, whenever at school, properly, there are miners shift overseas and mine overseas, because we have structured recognition of prior learning and actually put content into it and made people to appreciate that it's not necessarily a university degree that makes you a skilled person. You can be a skilled person without a university degree. In mining, we do that perfectly than any other sector in the economy. That's why when I boast, I always tell people that I'm in charge of the fastest transforming sector of the economy, and that sector is mining. It used to be the bastion of apartheid. I couldn't get a blasting certificate because it was reserved for a scheduled person, and a scheduled person remained a white male until we fought for 21 days for that right to accrue to a black person in 1987. So we've changed that. We've structured recognition of prior learning, and we're actually using it. There are people who have never been to university who are CEOs of companies.
Yeah, okay.
Can I tell you something, one secret? Do you know that there was never an Afrikaner who was a CEO of a mining company before 1994? Did you notice that? All Afrikaner CEOs are beneficiaries of change. They don't realize that.
Is this a lesson we must learn from the pre-94 government? I won't corner you into that. It's funny you speak about mining, because part of what I'm sure you're aware is, being talked about is whether or not the economy is growing in a way for the mining giants to stay, right? Yeah. Anglo has made headlines this year alone. We know it's broken into different subsidiaries, Tungela to coal. I think it used to be Anglo Platinum, it's now Valterra, that's taken away. Yes. And the feeling is that they're leaving the country, and for a whole host of reasons, including
that is not the issue.
The fact that we're not growing.
They were attacked by BHP Billiton for a hostile takeover. They had to react to that attack by breaking themselves into smaller pieces. And Valterra is Valterra, but in reality it is Anglo Platinum. Okay, they had to break themselves into smaller pieces as a defense mechanism from the attack by BHP Billiton. Now BHP, I have a view about them. They took Billiton, which was Afrikaner capital, popped up BHP, took Brian Gilbertson to run it for 6 months and fired him after 6 months. I have a big story about BHP. It's a crude Australian company that want to take over our fortunes. Anglo-American has to break into pieces as a defense mechanism so that BHP should appreciate what they want to take over. That's why they break into pieces but merge with tech to form Anglo-Tech, which is going to be formalized today, as Anglo-Tech today, 9th December.
Right.
It will be formalized because it's an old company that is moving between England and Vancouver today, but the secondary listing is in South Africa because it is a South African company.
I hear what you're saying, but I imagine the difficulty with accepting it is that this has also come with job losses, right? What do we say to people whose families can no longer be sustained because of this defense strategy, which my understanding was less of a defense strategy and more of Anglo saying, we just can't sustain this in South Africa any longer for exogenous
factors. That is not
factors.
the issue. The issue is BHP was driving hard for a hostile takeover. Anglo had to do something to defend themselves. And in the process, they weakened the technical staff, particularly at head office administration. But in the operations, they have not weakened. They continue with their operations, and actually people are taking a bigger responsibility. A person who was head of Anglo Platinum is today a CEO with a structure that looks after Valterra. De Beers is struggling because of the trouble facing diamonds
the world over,
globally.
Yes. Yeah.
And therefore, Anglo is defending itself from BHP. They are merging with tech.
Okay. Let's wear your ANC chairperson hat again, if we can, and speak about what's taking place here. I'm interested in trying to figure out what in your mind would make this a successful 4-day conference, because as I'm sure you can imagine, there are skeptics suggesting it's a talk shop. We know you can't really adopt new policies. We're just taking stock of where we are in the halfway mark, right? Given that, for you, to those skeptics, suggesting not much is going to come out of this, what does a successful gathering of this nature look like?
Can I tell you something? Many people call getting together a talk shop. But any strategist of worth the salt will know that every STA starts with a discussion as an idea. Only in the discussion and the idea coming out get concretized into program of action. So meeting as regular as we can to concretize what we should do can never be seen as a talk shop. It is a necessary intervention. For example, it is us who admit that we have not done well at local government level. And therefore, and we appreciate that we have not done well because deployment at local government level has been seen as an afterthought. It is only now that we start thinking about deploying people consciously to run major cities, rather than just leaving what is left over to run major cities and therefore collapse them.
Why did it take so long?
It took so long because the first thing is that Bantu education didn't prepare us to lead. It prepared us to be servants. We are doing trial and error to actually learn a number of mistakes and unlearn a number of things that we did because of Bantu education. So the 30 years was a schooling for us. We've learned many issues there. I can tell you that as a miner myself, I understand the situation much better than I did 30 years ago. I was mining all these years, but I know the issues much better today. That mining doesn't contribute a very huge amount on the GDP, but it is the biggest foreign direct earner for the country. And that is making a huge difference in the economics of the country.
What has that trial and error process you speak about over the last 30 years taught the party, do you think, about cadre deployment, as an example?
Cadre deployment, there's nothing wrong with cadre deployment. Because one of the things that you must think of, the public service, let's take public service. Let's take my department. A DG in my department is matric and had experience because he was a white male, he was given a room. I'm today having a DG who is an engineer and MBA, younger, more innovative, thinking better, and that is cadre deployment. And that cadre deployment is content, not the individuals, whether content is improving or not.
Has the cadre deployment we've seen always been driven by the content, though?
It has been driven by content. That's why you will see, actually, you go to the public service on your own, check all the teachers there. You'll hardly find a teacher there who doesn't have a master's degree. That is the first thing. And education is the initial signal of the content. And once you apply that knowledge, then you can improve your performance. That's why, for example, I'm running a department with 12 entities. Many of them are specialized. I'm complaining that Council for Geoscience, for example, is doing a lot of geological work and geological mapping. But we need an MBA graduate to run converting that work into mass commercial value. Same thing with Mintech. You'll have about 30 PhDs and master's researchers there. They produce concrete products, but they can't get mass commercial value out of those products because in the trial and error, we've put emphasis on specialized knowledge, researchers, but we didn't think of converting that research into mass commercial value. We are beginning to think about that. That is the trial and error I'm talking about.
All right, I know I've kept you here for very long, so maybe this will be my parting question. I know we were told this isn't a space to really discuss succession within the party. So let me ask if you would be available to be part of the top 6 or top 7 in the next
I'm
one.
more than 70 years old. I'm old. My brain is sharp, but the body tells me every morning that, listen, man, you have been in the field for too long. Please go and retire. And that's what I'm going to do.
This far and no further.
That's far and no further.
All right. Gwede Mantashe, great speaking to you, sir. Thanks very much indeed. I really appreciate it. Gwede Mantashe, giving me a sharp as we mark day 2 of the ANC's NGC. He, of course, is the chairperson of the ANC and also the Minister of Minerals and Petroleum Resources.